Davey D, Hard Knock Radio, hanging out with you this afternoon. Recently, there was a short mini doc that was posted up online that talks about gentrification in Oakland. The name of the documentary is A NOMAD. And I'm here with the filmmaker because it is getting a lot of, it's causing a lot of conversation. And for some folks, it's very affirming. Folks are watching it and saying, I knew this is what was going on. And others may be bothered because it's stepping on toes and letting folks know what time it is. The filmmaker, her name is Shirah Dedman, and I wanted to talk to her this afternoon about her documentary, who's in it, why she put it together, and how she's been receiving things. So welcome to Hard Knock Radio, Shirah.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Talk about the documentary, the title, A NOMAD.
Yeah, so A NOMAD, interestingly enough, comes out of what one of the characters says. And it's weird to talk about real life people and call them characters, but sometimes I don't know what else to call them. Mm-hmm. And he is currently incarcerated. We actually connected over Twitter, over social media. And he shared his story with me, which was amazing in terms of being an urban nomad, moving from place to place, even within the Bay Area, and how disruptive that was to his life and, you know, the community he was trying to build and how that affected him. And again, he's been in jail maybe like 17 years, and he's a young man. He's like my age. So it was pretty powerful, especially when I saw that story coincided with my own story. And I'm from LA, but we moved a lot within LA. And even if you move 5 miles away when you're young, that is very disruptive to your life in terms of building community. And I was lucky because I'm one of 10 children. Mm-hmm.
So you always had a community and a family.
But if I didn't have them, you know, I look at Nasaya's story and I think, wow, you know, it's so easy that could be me.
The documentary starts off with the notion that the Bay Area or Oakland has lost like 40% of its black population. That is stunning. And I guess we're at 23% about now. And so when people think about it, they, 40%. But I think many of us have been in Oakland long enough to remember when it was Chocolate City. There was D.C., there was Detroit, there was New Orleans, and there was Oakland. Not even L.A. could claim Chocolate City status, but Oakland could. And I don't think that really resonates with people, like what that means, what that entails, what does that do for the psyche of people who have been here a long time and had that identification. Others would say, well, we need more diversity, but the diversity, I would imagine, didn't come because that was a desired goal. It was more like you're being forced out and you're not welcome back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I like to point out that I'm from LA. I've lived up here a little bit over 2.5 years. So I like for people to know that I'm coming from being an outsider and doing this research into Oakland. So obviously, as being from LA, that Oakland's a black city. I mean, you just know that.
That's the word on the street down there.
Exactly. I mean, like I grew up knowing that, especially because Raider Nation, we have that together. So, I say in common. So anyway, so when I come up here and I'm doing a documentary about food justice, like that's what I was originally working on, and it was like, wait, so where are the black people? And people are like, gentrification. I'm like, wait, but where did they go? Mm-hmm. And so that's why the film really seeks to say, like, hey, where did they go? And it was powerful to me to, again, be able to talk to people where I think a lot of people who live it aren't used to necessarily even articulating it. They just know that, like, we're getting pushed out to Antioch, and then even the differences about what have happened to, let's say, homeowners versus renters, right? And those systems that are played. I mean, obviously they work together, but that was the point of the film, was to show those two things because they're not normally talked about together.
Right. That was one of the things that stood out about that is towards the end, you talked about the role of Fannie Mae. Has invested more in the whole thing of renting. It's not about home ownership. It's about, we're going to put our money here. So it's almost, I guess you're saying that they clearly understand that home ownership is going to be out of reach. It's an impossible dream for a vast majority of people.
Yes, and that goes beyond just Black and brown. And I think that's important to understand that right now, because of our financial system, it's going to uproot a lot of communities. And of course, ours as Black people have always been the most vulnerable, the most, how do you say it, open to attack, right? Through these schemes, through these financial schemes. But now a lot more people of different colors are going to be under attack as they turn us into a renter nation.
Let me ask you this. You know, you started off doing the film as a food justice situation. You're in Oakland working on this. Did you find that the food justice situation had shifted because what used to be food deserts, all of a sudden you're in Deep East Oakland, you see cafes, or West Oakland, and you're seeing boutique type of food stores? One, did the food deserts disappear once these things open, or did we find that the remaining population of Black folks was still finding food inaccessible because some of these new places are very expensive?
I think you just said it, really, that there is more quote unquote accessibility in terms of having access to food, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have access to affordable food. Just like if the Bay Area's building more housing, but if it's not access to more affordable housing, it doesn't do any good to the people who are here, and they can easily be displaced still. And I think we talk about food, we talk about housing, but we also need to talk about transportation and jobs. And my film doesn't talk about that, but I think that the more that we can start talking about these things in tandem, these are the complete systems that are in place that displace people and then keep them out, right? Like if you get displaced to Antioch, how affordable is it to get to Oakland? I mean, BART is ridiculously expensive. It's crazy. I mean, I go into the city, let's say for work, and I think, oh my God, I mean, this could easily be somebody's paycheck. I mean, it's crazy.
It's something that I don't think people take into account, especially if you don't do a 9 to 5. A lot of folks who listen are activists, so their schedules are flexible. You can maybe move and shake at 10 o'clock in the morning, and you're not out on the road at 7. I have a friend who we just ran into, hadn't seen him in a while, and he's out in Tracy. And he was telling me his commute starts at 3:30 in the morning, and he has to go all the way down to a place that he was a mile from because he can no longer afford to live in the San Jose area, right? So he's out in Tracy for affordability, and now he has to take a car and a train, and he has to be up at 3:30. And what he's telling me, and this is not the first time I've heard this story, is the quality of life is diminished because you don't spend time with family. And, you're talking about 2-hour commutes, 2.5 hours to and from with public transportation, and a very costly one at that, is something that I don't think people realize. I mean, even just going back and forth to San Francisco, it's an hour and a half, after 5 a.m. You're not getting into that city any quicker. You're just not. And I don't know if people kind of realize that or if they even care anymore.
Yeah, I think it's so crazy when you hear a lot of activists talking about this, because even in activism, everything is so siloed. And that's why I had people react to my film and say, why do you have so many themes? And I'm like, because the problem of displacement and gentrification is systemic. It's systematic. And the only way that I was going to be able to show the systematic nature of it is to bring in all of these topics and connect them together and show people that this is, these are the systems that are in place that move us out.
Right. We're talking with filmmaker Shirah Dedman about her new film, which is available online, which is called A NOMAD. And what are some of the themes you cover?
So I cover fair housing, the issue that you cannot find housing because of the color of your skin. I cover...
Do people find it hard to believe in 2018?
They sure do. And I have to tell you, again, being from LA, I have experienced that. And I love sharing that because, and I don't know how open I can be, but, to this day and age, we have things like colorism or how you talk and all this stuff. And so people would assume somebody like me might get housed or something like that. And I love telling the stories about how many times I called people up and they'd say, oh yeah, come on down, it's available. And I'd get there and they'd say, oh, it's not available, like over and over again. And so I share that with them to say how like real this inability to, people seeing your brown skin and they do not want to rent to you.
Yeah, we could even add a complexity to that. I have a friend who moved back here, who's originally from here, Asian, and told me that when she went for her housing around the lake, this had to be about maybe 4 years ago, the owner dropped the rent price. It was like $2,000 and dropped it for her to about $1,500 or $1,200 and said, do you have any other friends like you? So, not knowing that, homegirls from the Twomps and it's like, could turn up, if you were afraid of people turning up, that's the one. But, just doesn't look the part. And was just, alerting like, yo, this is what's going on. And so her thing is like, well, there's two sets of rules. Shirah shows up, light skinned, yes, but brown and black, obviously. The apartment's either not available or it's definitely going to be that rent. Somebody else shows up and they have a certain look or a certain hue or whatever, then it's like, let's drop the rent and do you have any other friends, and let me know and we could work something out. So there's definitely been a desire to put certain folks on. And how do you prove it? And when people are looking for housing, and you searched, you're like, hey, you can cut me a deal. You're not running to the fair housing or Casa or any of these places and starting to be like, this is what they did. You're just going to be like, I got a deal. Good luck on your end.
Yeah, and I think what was interesting, Angie Watson-Hajim, who's in it, talks about the fact so she works for Eden Housing, and they actually do testing where they can go and have somebody else call in and then have a black person call in and show that they aren't, housing the black person or giving them an application. But she, even when you watch the movie, she talks about the fact that even though they're doing this testing, showing that is still not necessarily good enough in a court of law. Mm-hmm. So you still can't get redress. And
because you have so many factors that come in, and you have a waiting list, so you get to pick and choose. It's not the highest bidder per se. It's all the other factors. She got a dog. She has 2 cars. All these different things,
Yeah, true story.
I want to play maybe a little excerpt from the film. Let's start off with the first gentleman that you have there, Jaron Guillory. Let's talk about him. He was laying out some history about the city of Oakland. What did you learn from that, and what do you want people to pick up from it?
Yeah, so John is really amazing because he's a real estate developer in Oakland, and I'm like, whoa, a black real estate developer in Oakland. Those exist. And they face a lot of, challenges in and of themselves. But what was great is that he's a West Oakland native. He even played for the Raiders. So he is thoroughly Oakland. And so he lays out just the changes that he's seen and how he, it came to light, this issue of gentrification for him, but also the challenges of what it takes to develop more, housing. And we really have to look at the processes from our local governments and whether they make that harder or easier. And that, that's a huge issue.
As a developer, is he on the dark side? And I ask this because when you hear the word developer, you're like, what does that mean? He seemed very knowledgeable and he seemed, pretty much down for the cause, and he laid out some history. We'll play a little excerpt from that. But do you find that, it's a thing of him looking and seeing these inadequacies, or is it a situation of him being like, damn, I wish I had an opportunity to be just as exploitive as these white developers?
Yeah, and I think that John being from West Oakland is all about Oakland, period. Like, if you ever hear him talk, he cannot talk enough about Oakland and what he wants to bring to Oakland. So it's really about creating a stronger community because that is his community. It's not about, how can we bring in the the biggest, the best, hand this off to developers who are, live in San Diego because they're all about the local economy. And his partner, I don't know if you know his partner, is Alan Jones. And
Yeah, we know Alan.
He is radical, right? He is radical. They both are thinking up radical schemes of like, how can we make the city work for us, right? Like, how can we finance affordable housing in radical ways? And so, to keep people here, they have buildings, like one of their buildings is the social services building, and they faced a lot of challenges because they put it in downtown or uptown. I get sometimes confused about it, but basically in the city center where the jobs are, and a lot of people were fighting that, and they were thinking, well, why wouldn't you put this where the jobs are, where you want the people to be? And so that shows you that the kind of urban planning that they're trying to do is that inclusive, because that is their community. This is their community.
It's interesting. When you were doing the documentary, did you find that folks moving in were very hostile to folks who had already been here? And what I mean by that is the experience over the years of doing this show and talking to people about gentrification. They say that they find a number of folks who feel like, you should be happy that I'm moving to Oakland. I'm doing you a favor. We came from New York, Chicago, the Midwest. We're white, you're black. And now the neighborhood will be good, right? So you kind of have that mentality. Some people call it Columbusizing. Others are very hostile and feel like, okay, I'll move to West Oakland because this is an investment. And part of that investment is that all these people, they need to go. And so they actively work, sometimes with the aid of, folks in powerful positions to try and find ways to remove folks. Let's call the police on minor things. Let's, create new laws and do some, neighborhood watches. And so all of a sudden you find, I'm almost sure that's part of the nomadism that you describe in the title. All of a sudden you're in your own neighborhood and you're not welcome. So how have you found the reception that people are receiving from newcomers? And have you talked to any of the newcomers to see how they want to fit in? Are they trying to build bridges? Or are they trying to, build exit ramps for, old Oaklanders to leave?
So first of all, I'd like to say that you don't a lot of times have to make new laws. They just exploit existing laws that were created for, I'm going to say, white people in the first place, especially to me, nuisance laws. Like those have always been historically used against African Americans. And so they're able to come in and use those laws yet again against African Americans, which disturbs me. And I think that's why a lot of people of color need to start fighting against these laws that are already in place. And I'm going to call it, right, like we had our own Jim Crow system and we still have it in place and we need to get rid of those stuff. But in terms of the hostility, I do think that there are different types of people, right? You have the people who are hostile. But then what's interesting is that you have the people who think they're not, who are very progressive in their ideas. And they say, we want to support the people staying. But in the meantime, they move out. And when they're in communal situations, they refuse to choose African Americans to actually move into the, communal housing. Mm-hmm. And so they're not actually choosing them. But their rhetoric is always that, oh, no, but we really want gentrification. It's terrible. We don't want to be gentrifiers. We want to be inclusive. Well, then be inclusive. Mm-hmm. Do it. And they're refusing to actually put it into action. And to me, that's almost worse than the people who are being hostile, because at least they're being honest. Right. And for them, the honesty, there's a disconnect. And then in terms of other, there's again other people who are really much, I would say somebody like me and the people I live with, but they've lived here now about 10 years. They come in, and they really want to figure out how can we be a part of the community. But it's, the truth of it is that we have these huge culture chasms, right, in America, period. And so in Oakland, the thing of it is that Black people actually had a say-so here, unlike everywhere else, in determining the culture of the area, determining the fact that, hey, guess what? We can hang out at the lake and we could play music loud and we could dance and we can laugh. Whereas everywhere in the country, dude, they would have already disbanded you with the cops, right? So now that that's happening in Oakland, people are like, whoa, this is our space. how are you using these laws against us? Why?
And that's a very different scenario that I think if you lived here long enough, you don't realize, no, it's always, like crossing this boundary is unusual for the Oaklander, but it's commonplace everywhere else.
Yeah, and I've had what I'm going to call gentrifiers come in and say, well, it's just common courtesy for things to be loud. And I say, well, who's common? Because, this common group who existed here already thought that that's okay. So who is your quote unquote common decency? And so you definitely have this battle again of culture where we as Americans need to, actually have these conversations openly instead of hiding behind, again, progressive language that isn't in fact being inclusive.
Shirah Dedman, she's the filmmaker for this documentary. You can see it online, You a Nomad. What is the ultimate goal with this piece? Obviously, it raises the issue and it gives people, I think, a tool to, to hold on to say, well, here's how I'm feeling, here's the issue, and it has the bells and whistles of a documentary. But what is the ultimate goal with this?
Yeah. The ultimate goal was to break down some myths around the topic of gentrification and displacement. I say displacement when I talk about the film. I say it's about the displacement of Black Oakland because I think that it goes so much beyond gentrification. Gentrification is a part of the larger systemic issues, right? Like not being able to find jobs and being excluded from the job market. I mean, that's a huge issue. And I think that the way that I approached it, which was obviously talking about the current issues, but bringing in the history and showing that this has been brewing, this issue has been brewing since, 1940s when we got here, or most of us got here, and bringing it into the present. A lot of people were, it's funny because a lot of people, like you said, feel the sense. Black people are like, yes, we knew it. We're not crazy. Like we knew that there was a problem. This is, this was being done to us. And again, but it's not just being done to us. There is what we do to ourselves too, in the sense of like, how do we start to find out and choose how to stay, right? Because a lot of us thought, man, shoot, I got a job, let me get out of here, right? And so when you choose to go, why were we choosing to go? Like that, so talking about these bigger issues, whereas most of it has just been this idea of like white people come in and that's it. So I was trying to make it bigger so that we can have more conversations because in the end, the goal is how do we build rooted communities?
Right. You mentioned being from Los Angeles, and that raises a couple of questions. Question one, having kept a place in LA for a number of years, I saw the gentrification take place down there with this large Black population being moved out of South Central than South LA. I hate calling it South LA. It would always be South Central, being moved out to Riverside, which would be, the equivalent of going to Antioch plus another 45 minutes, just in case you want to get an idea of the distance. But, did you see any parallels to, what was going on in the Bay and what was going on in Southern Cali? And let me just add one other thing for people to think about as well. California is big, and so oftentimes there's not a full appreciation of the large number of Black people that live in California. If you look at the actual numbers, I think California has like the third or fourth highest number of Black people living in a state, period. So there's a huge number of Black folks that live here, in the state, and you might not know it because, if you're in LA, everybody's in Riverside. If you're in Oakland, half the population is in Antioch and Pittsburgh, and so we kind of spread out and you don't see that deep concentration. But with that being said, did you see parallels to what you may have experienced in LA to up here?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, gentrification is not happening just in LA and in Oakland. It's happening nationwide. I mean, how many conversations are we having about what's happening in Brooklyn, right? Even what's happening in Atlanta. And that was the point of this film, was to show these systems that are in place, yes, here in Oakland, but as a microcosm for what's happening nationwide. And in LA, I mean, even my dad was raised in Compton. My mom was from South Central, and then their families, all dispersed. But what I thought was really interesting is that my dad's family have essentially moved to the Antelope Valley, like Lancaster, which is still LA County, but again, LA County
That's
is
way out there. That's like,
so far
if you're in Antelope Valley, that's like saying, well, I live in the Bay, but you live in Morgan Hill. Your family's in Oakland, but your relatives are in Morgan Hill somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know exactly where Morgan Hill is, but I'm going to say like
South of San Jose.
I was going to say Stockton. That's all. I was like, people are like, oh, yeah, I live in Oakland, Stockton. I'm like, that's not the same, that's crazy. So yeah, it's a huge difference. But a lot of African Americans have moved not only to, like you said, Riverside. I think Riverside's a good part. They've moved out to the IE. They moved out to the Antelope Valley, right. And so I have seen the migration in my own family, and so it's crazy. But I mean,
But everybody has to work in LA, so you have to commute these distances. So the 3 a.m. wake up call is a reality. Like my friend who moved to Tracy.
Absolutely, exactly. It could take 2 hours if you're on the train, which is probably the best way of getting there. 2 hours from Lancaster to Union Station in LA.
The other thing as we close out, Shirah, is there's a class scenario. And one of the things I'm hearing is that, there are lots of black people that are now moved to Oakland. Black people from back east, black people from other parts of the country, black people that ain't trying to build with black folks here. Black folks who have been empowered, who have money because they work in the tech industry, black folks who bring their own identity and sense of understanding to the table, black folks who show up who see Oakland as country. Well, this ain't New York, and and I'm from New York, and I run into people who are like, but they kind of country compared to us. So how do we deal with that? Because that has started to cause some problems where folks are like, you ain't no different than us, but in their mind is like, no, we have a different, we're not the same black folks as you. We different, and we're going to roll the way that we roll, and we have money and resources because we've been empowered. That's why we're here in the first place.
I love that you talk about that. That's always how you say this, like the unsaid thing in the room but I think more of us are starting to talk about that in that way, where we say we're gentrifiers, like I don't care the color of our skin, we're gentrifiers. But we have to own what that means in the sense of gentrification is, to me, the biggest thing is when you're displacing the culture, right? Mm-hmm. And so we have to decide like what side we're going to be on, right? And how do you bring in more people and empower the people who are already in the community? I'd say that I've been having this conversation a lot, especially as a filmmaker, because so many people are always owning other people's narratives, and they say, oh, but I empowered them to tell their story. And I'm like, did you really, or did you tell their story for them? And so, and I think about, again, having done You a Nomad as an outsider, but I definitely wanted to approach it as an outsider. I for no second wanted anybody to think that I was pretending as that every black person's alike, and that I'm just like interchangeable with a black person from Oakland, because I'm not, right? So, and it's how do we start to, like you said, empower the people from Oakland to tell their own stories? Right.
Well, there's always been that long relationship with Oakland and L.A., I mean, the Raider Nation, but there's always been a very, we cousins, so to speak. But you do see a difference when folks are coming from other cities, and there's some cities that are sister cities, like you see the close relationships a lot of times with the Bay and Detroit. There seems to be a similar thing, but then it becomes very different with other folks, especially as they come into the tech industry, especially when money shows up. And then you see these alliances where, folks in Oakland don't like the mayor. The newcomers are like rolling with, those types of alliances that you just go, how did this happen? They get empowered with the very enemies that you're trying to fight. So you're trying to get some concessions from entities in the city, and then the city comes along. Well, we already got some black folks, these new ones that we just, gave a grant to or allowed them these spaces. And that's where it becomes a challenge.
So I'm from the corporate world. Right. And then once I got laid off for like the umpteenth time, I was like, I'm out. And then I decided to be a filmmaker. Mm-hmm. The reason why I'm saying that is because I cannot tell you how many, let's say, especially media companies, tech industry media companies, okay, that bring in people of color and say, look at how many people of color we have. And I'm sitting here going, wait, but they're culturally the same as you. I think you guys lost the point of what diversity means. It's like diversity isn't a skin color. Diversity is about culture. And that, like you said, even people of the same skin color could have different culture. And so tech really, I have yet to see tech actually stand up to, again, the what I'm seeing, actually stand up to the idea of standing for diversity. I think they're standing for diversity of color right now, but I do not think that they're actually standing for diversity of thought and diversity of culture.
Real talk. I'm going to play a couple of excerpts as we leave out, from your film. Where can people find it? We'll listen to Jaron Guillory, and we'll listen to the sister. I'm forgetting the name, but the sister that's talking about, Angie, thank you. So you'll hear a couple of those as we kind of come out, but where can they find us?
You can find the film at www.youanomad.com. So it's like you a nomad, you are a nomad, but without the R. You a nomad. Mm-hmm. So YOUANOMAD.
That is the voice of Shirah Dedman. We appreciate her taking time out this afternoon. We're going to take a break on Hard Knock Radio, leave you with a couple of excerpts from this film. Check it out, have a conversation. We'll be right back. Peace.
When I grew up in Oakland, the black people were, for the most part, in West Oakland. That there were places in East Oakland where black people couldn't buy houses or they wouldn't rent to you. So for me, it never occurred to me that. Now the time. I'll tell you the time that it showed up for me was I go down to Raimondi and they practice at Raimondi Park, which is a place I grew up deep in the heart of West Oakland. And I grew up and played baseball there and football there and all that sort of stuff. So I'm there with my grandson. And so I remember this one night. I'm on the inside. Now you have to know where Raimondi is. I'm on the inside of this, running around this fence. And suddenly I saw these two white women running on the outside. And I stopped and said, damn, I don't remember ever seeing two white women running in, and this is about 7 o'clock at night. Wasn't in springtime, this was in the fall, right? So it's dark. Got two white women running in West Oakland around Raimondi Park in West Oakland. Damn, something has changed. In the last 40 years I've been doing work in Oakland, the demographics have shifted really dramatically. And services to service that demographic has shifted dramatically. When you step back and just look at it, Carter Harley Hale doesn't exist anymore. I mean, Carter Harley Hale was one of the big major department stores. Those stores aren't in business anymore. One of the ways you produce low-income housing, where do you get the money to finance new projects? It's investment tax credits. You have to have enough capital willing to invest in tying up assets, getting them entitled, and how the financing and how the money flows. That's really the driver of that impacts supply, probably more than anything else. Inside our own black community, we have our own squabbles that flow into the political front.
You cannot decide whether or not you want to do this. I will be the council member who wants to step in, and I will make sure that this is served.
Clarification will be provided in writing at another time. The President Pro Tem will be here next week.
I would like to hear from the city attorney what the rule is.
We are not going to hear from the city attorney at this time.
To hear from the city attorney.
I would like to make a motion.
K-Top, if you will please turn off the mic, the podium mic.
And frankly, in my judgment, it weakens whatever position that we think we might have. If we're dealing with political or development or whatever the case may be. And I think that being more supportive of each other as we go through this process would produce a better result if we're focused specifically on the black community. Now the challenge for real estate projects is the market is bigger than just the black community, and so you have to be able to build a product that can sustain itself inside the market element as well as addressing itself to the needs of the black community.
The president's promise to cut corporate tax rates is reducing private investment in affordable housing development.